Hello, everyone. When we talk about a film making it to a major international film festival, we usually tell that story focusing on two people, the director and the actor, the vision and the face. Those are the names that are highlighted, those are the names that get the interviews. But filmmaking is rarely, if ever, just those two people. It's a collective art form, and at the center of that collective, holding everything together financially, logistically, creatively, is the producer, the person who makes the film possible in the first place. My guest today is one of those people who are working as the driving force to make Pakistani independent films possible. The guest I have with me today is Kanwal Khoosat, a Pakistani producer, production designer, and the executive director of Olomopolo Media in Lahore. For almost a decade, she has been making deeply local Pakistani films and finding ways to take them to the world, often against significant odds. She has had films at the Busan International Film Festival, at the Cannes Film Festival, and at the International Film Festival Rotterdam. She was part of the Rotterdam Lab in 2025, building the kind of international networks that shape a film's journey even before it exists. And most recently, she took her latest film Lali to the Berlinale, and it is the first all Pakistani production to screen at the Berlinale. Like this, film by film, lab by lab, conversation by conversation, she has been building the infrastructure that allows Pakistani independent cinema to travel globally. And that is exactly what I want to chat about today with Kanwal Khoosat. Kanwal, welcome to the South Asians in Cinema podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, for this detailed introduction and, tracking my film record so far. It is really delightful to know that, you got all the details correct. And thank you for having me on this podcast. It's really, I would say, a prestige matter for me to be here talking about my films and discussing South Asian cinema with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanwal. So, before I get into all the details of how you are making Pakistani independent film possible, how you are traveling to the world with your films, I want to know first, how are you doing, Kanwal? How does this moment in your career feel to you right now?
Hmm. It is, in fact, a very interesting moment in my career, especially because, I keep switching between theater and digital media and films.
Mhm.
And theater, ironically, is something that I'm most passionate about. And whenever I do a film project, I come to realize that the glory, the grandeur, the exposure, and perhaps the kind of magnanimity this medium, this industry, or perhaps this form, this art form has, it is quite unmatched. So I feel like I am, particularly now that I have, let's say, in the process of showing my film to the world, my fifth film to the world, I feel like, this is a great moment of transition for me. You know, I haven't done theater in a few months
Mhm.
lately. And now that I'm, let's say, taking Lali, to the world at large and preparing the domestic release of it
Mhm.
and trying out possibilities of distributing it in the international regions as well, I feel like things are in flux right now, but full of, I would say, interesting and, exciting possibilities. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I'm doing right now.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Of course, Kanwal, when I was going through how extensively you work in the whole Pakistani independent art scenario, you have been doing a lot. You are doing theater, as you have just told me. You are doing production designing. You're running Olomopolo. You're curating festivals. So you have built this entire ecosystem around independent art in Pakistan now. But I want to start with film specifically, and I would also love to ask you, what was it that drew you towards cinema in the first place? Because you were doing a lot already. So, what inspired you to work in films?
Uh, I'd say, the intimacy or perhaps the visceral quality of telling a story or sharing a story, in theater is something that I value a lot. And perhaps I keep going back to it, every now and then. I have tried quite a few forms. I have been, let's say, I have published a book also. I have curated and edited that. I curate visual art exhibitions as well. I am now a gallery owner. Apart from just doing theater and running this, multidisciplinary organization, which is at the heart of which is, of course, community and dialogue and youth, are the kind of subjects, and social advocacy is something that, I'm very keen on pursuing, through any art forms that I practice. But, what I felt like and what I tried, let's say, perhaps outlining in my previous answer as well, that, what I experienced through cinema is the global outreach, perhaps, the scale is unmatched. I would say. So it is exactly for me like, intimacy versus, the scale. Uh, theater, theater's intimacy versus the scale of of films. And then that too of international, let's say, nature and outreach. Uh, I would say that it was 2017 when I did my first feature fiction film. And I just thought that this is going to be just another production project. Of course, I have produced so many other projects. I've produced for television, I've produced for theater where there is no infrastructure, at least, when it comes to the context of Pakistan. And then I have done those, let's say, and I have also filmed my theater productions for international apps, especially this Indian app, Z
Hi.
Theater for
Okay.
Z5 and all that. So I thought that, I had kind of, experienced scale in a way. But man, when we were in the process of releasing our first film, Zindagi Tamasha, which, in English translates to Circus of Life, I just felt like that it is an experience and an exposure that perhaps, I even as an artist, and perhaps in my estimate of an artist, let's say that, I had not experienced that. And the kind of, let's say, magnanimity the audience of a cinema, let's say, grace you with, I had not experienced that. So perhaps it was not just, let's say, the magnanimity of the audience, but I would say uh, the kind of exposure as a selfish artist, if I may to speak here, that I got to experience through films. And I thought that, man, this is how you arrive on the international front. Imagine my first time film premiering at Busan, and I had no idea how the international film festival circuit operate. It was just 3 days before, we were going into the production of our second feature film, Kamli, that, we were going to, let's say, have a world premiere of the Circus of Lights and the Gitamasha at Busan. So we did not even know that, the filmmakers perhaps, could travel. We thought that, it is only the directors, since they are the ones, who are invited by the festivals, only they could go. So I didn't even go. And even then, Sarma went for a day, perhaps, screened the film there and then came back because we had to shoot our second film, and
Yeah.
then COVID, and then the whole series of unfortunate events. Of course, whatever happened to that, we will discuss that later if we get a chance to. So I just thought that this kind of penetration that you get on all the lateral levels of the, let's say, society, structures, sectors, institutions, and whatever not. Seriously, I just thought that, I had no idea. I maybe have been, living in a cocoon where I thought that, I so enjoy the intimacy of theater. But then here is film, which, like, practically, can cross borders, can transcend to any geographical region, can land with any culture, speaks its language to all sorts of people and whatever not. So this transcendental nature, perhaps, of cinema lured me into. Yeah.
Yeah, no, of course, you're absolutely right about it. I was just listening to the exciting voice of yours when you were like kind of describing the whole journey and why you chose film as a medium. That excitement is very palpable, Kanwal. So that answers my question so very beautifully. Thank you. Thank you so much. But I also want to know a bit about, did you ever envision a career where your work, be it film or theater or anything you were working on, did you envision your work to travel so much around the world and resonate so beautifully, so powerfully with people who you have probably never met before? So, did you plan to do all this? Did you think about what kind of audience you are going to attract with the films you are working on?
But it wasn't the, before I really, did my first film that I got to taste all of this.
Mhm,
I was really never envisioning, I was not planning for this. I had no exposure of that.
mhm,
Having worked on television before, we had our own private production house and we would produce television series and would sell them, to private channels here in Pakistan. And I was quite aware of the outreach of our dramas to the international audience, to not just Pakistani diaspora, but South Asia, in
mhm,
general. And then, people who would understand the emotional grammar of our storytelling, you know.
mhm,
So they were quite popular. And I was fortunate enough to, let's say, have scored such a series already, when I was working on television. So but, when I switched to, making this company of mine and, dived deep into my theater career, that's when
mhm,
I thought that, my entire ethos kind of, transitioned into the fact that, yes, the world has gone digital and yes, everything's being done remotely, but where is the human connection? And that somehow became the foundation of what I wanted to pursue for the, for the following years of my life. And I was very resistant, to the idea of taking things back to digital and creating a live audience and curating a live audience, perhaps, to have a tangible connection,
mhm,
with the people I wanted to share my stories with. And that is why, I was not even willing to, film my theater for the digital media or to get it distributed on the
mhm,
digital media.
mhm.
So I was actually working, very deliberately working on the contrary to what would happen to me, with my foray into films.
Yeah.
And like I said in again, my previous answer, when I got to taste it, I
There's a
just realized that, whoa, there are so many other possibilities, and why am I, eliminating, so much joy, and that I can get,
Mhm,
and yeah, exactly. So again, that is something that I now realize, not just because of, let's say, the joy that it brings with it, the exposure that comes with
mhm,
it,
mhm.
perhaps the all the love and belonging that we get
Yeah.
through the experience of sharing our films with the international audience.
Mhm,
It is also very pertinent to the business aspect of the films as well. You know,
mhm, mhm,
Pakistan is a growing market.
mhm,
We are a small sized population, of course, compared to the international, let's say, scale.
mhm,
Otherwise, a very, very populous, very densely populous country, populated country. But I do realize that, here cinema does not exist as an industry yet.
mhm,
We operate out of a very indie, very self-made kind of structures that, and then we work out of our silos.
mhm,
So that it felt like. So what I was, let's say, drastically became aware of was the fact that there are structures, there are systems, there are ways of going about things, in the world out there.
mhm,
And here we are just struggling to be able to make a film, and then what are the kind of films that are appreciated or perhaps welcomed by, let's say, the various regions in the international
mhm,
world as well, and what are the, let's say, standards of and or the biases or the, let's say, the filters with which, let's say, the festival circuit operates, the distribution and whatever not. So it was, let's say, the professional pursuit of learning,
mhm,
those dynamics and that aspect of business that drew me to. I started out with, producing films,
mhm,
and with this last film, even, I still produced. I haven't ventured into directing yet.
mhm. Do you
However,
want
I
to?
must admit that production design is something that I am most passionate about when it comes to making films.
Uh-huh.
However, I felt like it was my professional responsibility,
Mhm.
as a producer, because a producer's job lies at the intersection of, yes, creativity and business.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I had to learn that there was no other way. And when you work, or perhaps uh, are working in a country like ours,
Mhm,
like I said, that, there are no standard
Mm-hmm.
structures, or perhaps
Yeah, of
infrastructure
course,
is
of course.
not, that we are given. We have to, make do for our own selves,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Build
to fend
everything
for
from
our own selves.
scratch. Yeah.
I just felt like, you know, if I don't learn these, and I don't invest in my, learning, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
there is no other way for me to progress, and perhaps I would not get to make another film.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get a point. That actually gives me the true reality of somebody who's trying to make it in an industry which is still growing. So you have to build everything from scratch. You have to put all you have into it to test if it really works. Thank you so much for that, Kanwal. And I remember from a very earlier time that Geet was broadcast on Z Theatre for Indian audience. That was probably in 2020. And it was one of those rare moments of genuine cross border exchange between Pakistani and Indian arts. I know that you have talked about the switch of mind you had about doing theater in person and then recording it and broadcasting it. Of course, you had that like switch of your thoughts. But I would also love to know, Kanwal, what was it like to have your work cross that particular border? I'm asking you this because, I mean, what does that cultural proximity mean to you, given how politically complicated the relationship between the two countries is? How did that feel like, Kanwal?
Of course, it felt most natural to share,
Yeah.
let's say, my story with my own people. We have this, of course, shared history, and nothing, let's say, that's happened afterwards can change that fact.
Definitely.
So, we don't just have a shared history, we have a shared culture, we have a common language.
Yes.
We understand what I said, the emotional grammar, that even that is common. So we as people are still the same,
Mm-hmm.
and getting to share my story with particularly the Indian audience was so thrilling, especially given the backdrop of the, let's say, the political tension that was going on. As South Asians, again, we love going against the current.
Uh-huh.
So there is always a political and a diplomatic front, and then there is us, the people who always love to bond with each other. And films and dramas are something that, yes, of course, that's our bond, that's our love.
Mm-hmm.
And that lets us, let's say, talk to each other so frequently, and so emotionally and so deeply. And it was as simple as, let's say, just writing a story
Mm-hmm.
and doing nothing to it to
Yeah.
adapt it, keeping in mind that it was not going to be perhaps shown in the confines of a certain geographical region. You know, for
Mm-hmm.
example, in the within the boundary of Pakistan, since it was not going to be shown, and that unfortunate thing also happened, that
Yeah.
uh, Z Theater was not available here yet, knowing that it will be seen, by our own people, on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
But I really didn't have to change anything. We just fictionalized the names of the cities. Those two little words, just to make it accessible, just so
Yeah,
that
of course.
everybody could relate with this, let's say, fictional, city that I had
Uh-huh.
perhaps, made, just so that it doesn't, thing. And seriously, the actors works, perhaps, they were received so well,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
story and
Definitely.
everything. Just finding the opportunity or the possibility that our work, like our dramas, have always had experience, it will be seen outside of Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
was, most natural, most thrilling, most exciting.
Yes.
And we felt like, on television, when things get stagnant, when things become into trends, when certain types of stories, become trends, this was such a breath of fresh air that, there is a media where you don't have to listen to the producers and the kind of producers that are there, not telling you to pursue your own heart. Just follow your heart. And for once, I just felt like, what an artistic bliss, what freedom, man.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So,
Oh,
yeah, it was very, very exciting.
uh-huh. Yeah, no, of course, of course. And thank God for people like you who, despite everything that is happening around the world, despite everything that happens on all sides of the borders in South Asia, thank you for keeping that conversation and that spark alive through arts and through films and through music and everything else. Thank you, Kanwal. And I was also looking into what a fantastic travel Zindagi Tamasha has had. Even when like no other Pakistani film was probably traveling that much and no other Pakistani film's name we were hearing that much of. But Zindagi Tamasha won the Kinji Suk Award at Busan and became Pakistan's official Oscar submission. That is a fantastic journey. And then, when I was reading more into how Pakistan received that film, I got to know that it was effectively banned from theatrical release at home. Kanwal, I want to know what was it actually like to experience that? Of course, to watch a film travel the world and receive the kind of recognition while simultaneously being unable to reach its own audience. I know you have touched upon it a bit, but I also want to know more about the reality of that.
So again, the baseline was that, the film could not reach the audience it was made for, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And that's where we started. But then, the more, let's say, it was a mix of grief and then, a lot of um, I would say excitement that, it started, it did its premiere at Busan, internationally. And there was so many other exciting films that were being shown there. Perhaps Nandita Das was also there with her film. So getting to share the international stage with artists, whom, let's say, I have grown up or perhaps, I've always admired professionally, their work. So, you know, perhaps, that had set the tone for us that this is how the film is going to come back to, our home country.
Mhm,
Uh, and then there was COVID also in between,
mhm,
and we had to really, wait for a good amount of time
mhm,
in order to think that, when should we
mhm,
be able to release that film.
mhm,
When we first tried, of course, it coincided very with a very unfortunate political event, and that got into, let's say, that maligning, that smearing campaign. Since films are still, let's say, an art form that are being negotiated here, in our part of the world, as to if they're still as if it's still okay, as to it's if it's still okay to make films, is it, let's say, artistically gratifying enough or not, given the size of, again, our market. And then, when you start discussing art forms, in the context of a certain religion, again, so we were already, dealing with those kind of, let's say, challenges here. However, it was, yes, you have used the correct term, banned, but then, to be technically correct, it was not reviewed by our province's censor board. It was given an okay certificate from the other two provincial and the federal censor board, the one other provincial censor board and then the federal board. However, the second time we were trying to distribute it through a distribution firm, we did not think that, it is going to make any financial sense at all to not release the film in the province where the 70% of the business comes from.
of course.
So what is the point of even releasing the film in the federal territory where there are literally just two cinemas
Yeah.
and then 17 screens in the other province? So I would say that perhaps it is more than 70% of the business and then the number of screens are in the province where it was refused to be, let's say, reviewed or given up. So of course,
Yeah, of
so
course.
there might be technicalities to it, but then, yes, broadly speaking, it was disallowed to be,
Mhm, mhm.
screened here.
Yeah, yeah.
That came with a, lot of heartbreak. But more than heartbreak, of course, it disallowed us any possibility of getting any money back. This was again a film that was made out of our own pocket. It was our personal money. It was really, not even the private equity that was raised with. That was literally our own money that went into making that film, which meant that, the entire amount of that money, that entire saving, that entire, let's say, the put aside money, from other ventures that we had collected and whatever not had all gone down the drain, which didn't just mean that, this film is not going to be seen or get us any money back. That also somehow, put us into a position where we were thinking for a good amount of time that, how are we be going to, how are we be going, how will we be able to, make a new project,
Course.
um, so yeah, it wasn't just, let's say, that particular project that was jeopardized. It was not just, let's say, our current situation that was jeopardized, but also our potential future potential, that got sabotaged with that. So it was, let's say, detrimental on many levels, and since there was COVID and then that whole political, maligning campaign going on, and then the whole social media outcry, going on there, it was, let's say, very depressing times, thinking that uh, our own people are not strong enough, or perhaps are not, coming to a front where they would be able to support the film. So, what is the point of, making a story if you don't get to share it with a set of audience,
Of
So
course.
people are, you know, they're not coming out for the film,
Mhm,
you know.
mhm, mhm,
But then all of that, the Basum, I would say, got washed out eventually.
mhm.
Much of it, so much of it,
Yeah,
not all of it.
yeah, yeah.
But then the film was, and then, and then we just kept the film to ourselves. We thought that, since we could not show it, and then, it was risky also, to get the film out.
Mhm,
But then we noticed that on social media, in private groups, on WhatsApp,
mhm,
there were these other kind of activities going on where they were saying that, people had somehow acquired, those torrents of the film somehow
mhm.
because, we were, giving it to,
Yeah.
festivals, internationally.
Mhm,
So, some of the groups did, you know, get get their hands on to some of the torrents
mhm,
of the film,
mhm.
and then they were privately selling those torrents
Right. Oh,
for quite a hefty amount of time, hefty amount of money.
right.
That came into our notice, a couple of friends, sent me that link and said that, this is what is going on in the private
Yeah.
groups,
And how did you deal
on
with
social
that?
media. Imagine, then then whatever that we could, of course, there is a, online FIR portal where you can, do the cyber crime complaints and whatever not. We took an entire night and then, tried finding connections wherever we could, file a complaint. But we knew that, it is not going to be effective enough, whatever remedy that, may be provided to us, and if it is going to be timely or not.
Mm,
And that particular campaigns that I'm referring to, of course, was again, they were going to, leak that, or perhaps, because they were already collecting, because I joined that group and I pretended to be, let's say, someone who was interested in, seeing that film. And only when I got this, bank details that, you have to deposit this much amount of money, only then I'm going to be given at this particular point of time the link to the film and what. So
uh-huh.
we realize. So what Sarma did then, as a very
Mhm,
unprecedented, and I would say very brave and a very heartbreaking decision, that he just released the film on YouTube on his channel,
mhm.
just like that. Uh,
Yeah, that is
yeah. So
so
this
very
is how we
heartbreaking for
managed that.
any artist. That is so very heartbreaking for any artist. You're fighting your own censorship system in your country, and then you are also fighting piracy. But you can't
Yeah.
also show a film to your audience, which you have made with so much love and care. That is heartbreaking for any artist. But I still wanted to ask you this question, Kanwal, because that is often the reality of South Asian independent filmmakers. It's not even just a case for Pakistan. It happens in
Yeah.
Bangladesh. It happens in other parts of South Asia as well. And sometimes artists have spoken about how they have invested everything they had into the film and they couldn't show it in theater and they had absolutely no way to recoup that kind of money, even the cost they have invested from out of their own pocket. They had no way to recoup that since the film didn't have a theatrical run. People do talk about that in South Asia a lot. That's why I wanted to know your experience. And I'd also love to know, Kanwal, you have said that it was a depressing time. It was hard to get back even for your future project. But from that, how did you manage to make films again? How did you manage to have the courage, the mental energy to come back to make films again, Kanwal?
I will begin with a quotation that I heard Sarmat saying somewhere. He was just saying that, we got so afraid and so depressed with what happened to Zindagi Tamasha that we made Joyland afterwards. Which had its own journey. Again, locally again, it was so turbulent that we again felt like, now people ask us whenever we make a film, and especially with Lali, and not even jokingly, do they ask us that, you have, are you really going to release it on Pakistan? They think that perhaps, we foster those controversies, or perhaps, we somehow, do this out of, let's say, our deliberate planning that. So, whatever not. Uh, so, jokes aside, uh, the generation that I am and Sarmad is, uh, we are the 80s generation. And whatever that was politically happening in our country, particularly in the 80s, again, and the kind of humans that we have evolved to be, our first and last survival tactic is to not depend on anyone else, you know. Um, there's only you by yourself is the mantra that we all follow, especially when you're an artist, and you're from that era. Of course, times have never been, let's say, more difficult or easier, perhaps, it's always been, let's say, one tragedy or the other, and you can't really compare one thing with the other. But then again, but 80s is the most notorious time that, we have been through. So I'm a production designer by passion, I would say, that, and a producer out of necessity. Because really, if Sarma could not trust me as a professional, then who would he really go to? And of course, this is a question for Sarma to answer. But then there lies some deliberate thinking on his part that it's the fifth film that we have you know been that we have done together. So of course, that does show that the kind of, let's say, faith we have in each other as artists. But besides that, I'm saying that we work across industries, we work across mediums, just to, of course, be able to do our next projects. So we do a lot of television. Sama does a lot of he does a lot of commercials. Let's say he does television also, so he works across the digital media as well. I run this company, this organization, which is, let's say, ironically a not-for-profit organization. Ironically, in the sense that I have to actually earn money from somewhere else, from my freelance, from my academics. Let's say that because I teach as well, so I have to do tons of other things in order to bring money to run this organization, and so does Sarmad, for his own projects. So we earn money from our other projects, from our other jobs, and then we enable ourselves or help ourselves make our new films. You know, so that is how we do it. And then we are such, let's say, hopeless artists that if we don't make our projects, our artistic projects, then what else will we do? Sarmad also, teaches, has been teaching, doesn't do it as regularly now, but he quit, keeps quitting television, of course, but then, goes back perhaps, for acting projects, doesn't direct anymore, but then, keeps going back to that. Uh, you know, Commercials, of course, are better paying in terms of, let's say, in comparison to television. Uh, so yeah, so if we don't do that, so matlab, he is a psychology specialist. He's done his master's in psychology, but then he didn't pursue that. I am a graphic designer. I'm a communication designer by qualification. I do that, but not for my sustenance and not for my career. My job allows me to, of course, design not just, let's say, the spaces, but also, let's say, some 2D services and whatever not. So again, I'm just saying that our artistic survival also depends on the projects that are in the pipeline that we are thinking of and whatever not. So it was purely out of our artistic pursuit, which is, let's say, keeps us alive, keeps us going. Um, you know, that kept propelling us.
Kanwal, thank you so much for giving me such a frank answer, because oftentimes when we talk about making a film and taking it to a international festival, it sounds very exciting and glamorous. And like with social media and everything, we only get to see the glamorous part of it, right? But a lot of time, effort, and energy changing between hats and roles get in the behind. And we often don't talk about that. But your answer actually gave me the true reality of living that life. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kanwal. Thanks. And Joyland is one of my favorite South Asian films. I remember I was in Netherlands when that was making a theatrical run. And of course, I was living in a small city in Netherlands and the local theater didn't have it. So I wrote an email to them, like, can you please bring it? And they had it for 1 week and had a few show. And then like all the South Asian peoples who were living in that small city, we kind of like went together to see the film and we were like mind blown and we cried so much. That was one of the best South Asian films in recent time, I'd say. I know like it was Pakistan's first official selection at Cannes. It won Zuri Prize in Uncertain Regard and the Queer Palm. And you were the production designer in it, if I'm not wrong. So what did that kind of accolade and appreciation mean to you personally, Kanwal? And what do you think it meant for Pakistani independent cinema more broadly?
So perhaps I will, uh, address the latter part of your question first. What we realized again, again, garnering so much international glory and whatever not, this very bitter realization was that no one film can fix the gaps or let's say the loopholes that we have here. It can't fix or perhaps, get us an industry infrastructure that we lack here so massively. Uh, so that was perhaps the bitter realization that came with it as a part and parcel. But then, going back to, seeing this fact or in fact, experiencing the moment that in the 76 years or 75 years of our existence, as an independent country, not even one film had made it to Cannes. And it was exactly perhaps in 1947 or 48, it was, that our last film had been to that festival. So it was grand, unprecedented. We didn't even know, like I said, Zindagi Tamasha had been to Busan, but none of us could travel there, except for Sarma, and that too for seriously just 2 days. So we didn't know how to even, market yourselves in a festival and to be able to enjoy the
Yeah.
glory that international stage, allows you to experience. But with this one, you know, perhaps so many of our grievances, so many of our, let's say, lags got washed out because we did actually get to experience our film being shared, with an international Cannes audience because, that's so international and so massive and so generous. But then, it ended up winning accolades there, which validated the fact that, when you are true in your pursuit, uh, the world, the cosmos, the universe does, let's say, bless you. So it was, let's say, experiencing a circle come, a fulfilling or let's say the completion of the circle for us. So especially for me, because, I had done production design and that was a film that was very, very personal in so many ways. This was in fact, my first experience of doing an international, co-production or a collaboration that ways, it was entirely shot and done the pre-production of in Pakistan. But then, there were other producers who were from the other parts of the world, and there were some, let's say, practices that they wanted us to apply. There were some standards that they wanted us to, apply here in order to, stay qualified for, for the film to be called an international collaboration, whatever not. So that exposure and then getting to experience again the world with it. I would say on a very literal level, I got to travel with my film,
That must have
which
been
would be
magical.
exactly. And going to France for the first time and experiencing Cannes Film Festival, which I had only heard of again. And I could never imagine in my wildest dream that any of our films, my films, would get to travel there. So it so many ways it was such a wild dream come true, which I had not even dared dreaming of.
Mhm.
So it was the wildest
Yeah.
experience, you know, that came with it. Um, and then, of course, with the selection of one of the characters in the film and then the actor for it, became the bone of contention again. And it had a very, very tumultuous, very turbulent journey back home. It again, for the second time in a row, coincided with another political event. The transgenders rights bill,
Yeah.
the movement around it to get it revoked,
Mhm.
that was going on. And it happened to have this trans woman, playing one of the leading roles.
Yeah.
So again, here, we got to share that paradox of life, that film, a
Mhm.
narrative, a story that is so absolutely loved, by the world,
Yeah.
is not welcomed here. And it met exactly the same fate what, Zindagi Tamasha did, that, it was not reviewed by the biggest censor board, the biggest province censor board here, and it was allowed. And since we had to, and then we have to absolutely operate under those, very dichotomous and very troubling kind of situations where you still have to go ahead with that, Tabassum, I would say.
Of course.
So there is this stipulation of the Pakistan Academy Selection Committee. Of course, it is from the Oscars that you have to have a 7-day theatrical run in
Yeah.
order for your film to be considered for the official selection from your
Right.
country.
Right.
And only then it can, make it to eventually to the long list and then the short list and whatever
Yeah.
not. I don't remember. I keep forgetting this, but I think Joyland made it to the short list or perhaps to the long list,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
did get to that. And I thought that, with this film and the kind of film that I'd already done, we knew that, what were our prospective
Mhm.
projects.
Mhm.
I knew that, with this one, we stood the best chance.
Yeah.
And we were again, it didn't make it to the perhaps in the short list or to
Mhm.
the nominations, which was, again, very, very heartbreaking. We
Yeah.
thought that, this is the film that had all the right ingredients in it. But uh the context that I'm framing here is
Mhm.
that we could not make money out of it because Punjab, it could not be shown. But then we had to have this domestic run for at least 7 days in order to be
Mhm.
qualified for that
Mhm.
selection
Mhm.
from Pakistan. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
did release that film, and
Mhm.
in the most butchered kind of, let's say, edited versions the film could afford, it
Yeah.
was shown that ways. And it was a 4:3 aspect ratio film in so many theaters here,
Don't have to.
a lot of people, our friends, who went to see that film told us that it was stretched. It
Right.
was
Right. Of
stretched
course.
horizontally, and then it was in Punjabi.
Mhm.
And imagine, in Sindh and Karachi, where let's say 90% of the population doesn't understand Punjabi, they were relying on those subtitles in
Mhm.
English.
Mhm. Mhm.
The subtitles got cropped out because they had stretched the
Right. Of
the the,
course.
the,
Oh
the
no.
picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So that was also happening. So again, we are not just let's say ill-equipped, we are poor in the head also. We couldn't tell that it was a 4:3 aspect ratio. So there's technical challenges also that you have to, encounter,
Yeah.
apart from the macro level concerns and the
Of
censorships,
course.
and then the perpetual and this inevitable loss, financial loss that that you have
Mhm.
already scored yourself yet again. So, despite all that. Uh,
But no,
so
Kanwal,
yeah,
I mean,
a very topsy-turvy
yeah.
journey
No, of course, of
yet
course.
again.
I mean, you're up against a lot. It's not just the censorship, not
Uh,
just how to take your film to an international film festival. How do you travel by yourself? How do you do that in time? But it's also a fight against the infrastructure you have in the country. So
yeah.
it's a fight against a whole lot of components. But Kanwal, like, having had that sort of journey with two consecutive films, do you think when you choose what to work on next, or you choose the story that you want to adapt for a film theater, or like whatever the art form is, do you think those experience kind of play a factor into deciding what you want to work with? Does it kind of make you compromise on what topic you want to choose next or what story you want to choose next? Does that affect it?
Uh, I wouldn't say it compromised our choices, but it did affect. uh, the kind of choices we wanted to then make. Yes. But that affect, like I said, that, wouldn't want to count as a compromise really. So it comes on two levels again. It came in two levels. We knew that what kind of subjects should we not now delve, for some time now, at least not with our immediate next film. So yeah, we wanted to be cognizant of that, without any artistic compromise. Because, as a storyteller, as a film producer, perhaps, or as a producer across several mediums, you always have a bag full of stories, that you're yearning to make, that you're planning to make,
Mm-hmm.
that you're working towards, materializing. So we already had a story, like I said, that, while we were releasing Joel, and we already knew what was our other film going to be, and we were working on the, let's say, the planning of
Mm-hmm.
those few projects, out of which Lali has been already materialized, thankfully. Uh, so yeah, we knew that, what kind of direction should we not be taking in
Mm-hmm.
order to, and in fact, the realization, started happening to us, or perhaps, we became aware of that much earlier than actually, getting to produce Lali. I
Right.
would say that, whatever happened to Zindagi Tamasha, the kind of hasty decision, or perhaps the poorly decision that we ended up making for Kamli, was that we have to show it to our people. This has to release in Pakistan. So what we did is, put a blinder on, and just forgot about, what international festivals, what international
Mm-hmm.
distribution. And we just, let's say, thought our date and made all our efforts, concerted all our efforts into releasing that film.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually, put us in a compromising situation where we could not have a world premiere for our film, where we could not get an international premiere of our film, and all that. So that had, made me, at least, as a producer, aware of, what kind of mistakes should you not make, when you produce a film and you want the film to be seen across regions, or at least, internationally. So that was kind of a learning, and with Joyland, that, this is how distribution, or perhaps, festival circuits should be planned, and whatever not, after the fate what Joyland and Zindagi Tamasha met. Of course, artistically we knew that, some of the directions we should not be pursuing for some time, because, it's gone so acerbic. However, the massive learnings that came out of how they were, distributed, and then, designed the festival circuit, like, I knew that those mistakes I'm not going to repeat. I should be making now new mistakes with this film, but not repeating the old ones. So, uh, again, the other realization when we did complete this new project of ours, you know, we knew what I realized, and this is a very blatant admission. I realized that the international audience, perhaps at least in the festival circuit,
Mm-hmm.
it is easier for our politically volatile films to make their place. And when you say that, and it wasn't out of their, let's say, political nature that we made the films that we did, we had those stories, we loved those stories, we wanted to tell those stories,
Okay.
that we made those films.
Mm-hmm.
And now, when we were conscious of what kind of films to not make, and this is another story which doesn't check all those kind of, political boxes,
Mm-hmm.
we did have a hard time getting it distributed in the international festival circuit. Because by that time, I would say that, the international festivals, were kind of now, made up their minds, or perhaps, set their bias, that if a film comes out of South Asia, it
Yeah.
has to be at least this much politically volatile for
Right.
them to easily position it, in
Mm-hmm.
their programs, or or perhaps, in the array of other films, they would like that film to be that, what do you call, edgy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get your point. It feels like in all sides of order, they have certain boxes for us, and we need to fit in some ways.
Exactly.
Oh, wait.
Exactly. So while we're trying to navigate, of course, the challenges that we meet here every time we make a film, we came across, the challenges that we had not faced in the international, now that we had tasted, of course, the international exposure and all the joy and glory and whatever not, what I've been ranting about, now that I wanted to further on. on that, we came
Mhm.
across some new challenges that no, a film made out of purely artistic pursuit, beautifully made, well received also when it eventually you know, got to be seen by its audience, and they all loved it. But since it did not have those apparent boxes checked, with its narrative, the same perhaps centers would not approve of it, because now they have made up their minds, or perhaps, created a box for us that it has to be at least, this and that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kanwal. Thank you for sharing that. Because again, oftentimes when we think about a film traveling to international circuits and international festivals, it is so very easy to focus on only the glamour of it, only the pride side of it, and to forget all about like how they expect us to arrive there, how we
Yeah.
feel to walk on those rooms. We sometimes don't get to focus on that, actually. I want to know a bit about Rotterdam Lab, Kanwal, because I know that you were part of the Rotterdam Lab in 2025 and being a Pakistani artist, a Pakistani producer, and you primarily develop films which are locally made in Pakistan, which are very much stories set in Pakistan. And being that and having those kind of stories, how was your experience of walking into such an international room of Rotterdam Lab? How was your experience with that, Kanwal?
I would say the Basum, since I'm not a trained filmmaker, like, I haven't studied filmmaking, and whatever little knowledge that I have, has come out of my hands-on practice, or working in the field, Uh, I even teach media, and that's the first thing I tell my students that when I started teaching to an A levels class, I said that I haven't done A levels, I haven't studied media myself, and I haven't taught before, and here I am doing all the three things now.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of, like I said, that, dependent on myself, did a lot of self reading, and the training, of course, came through all the projects that I had done by then, and then, the other kind of projects, that I did. But I did not have a formal training, like I said. And the Rotterdam Lab was that first ever kind of an experience for me where there was, let's say, a formal lab, you know, and I got to meet other producers, who were mainly from the indie, film sector. I would say most of them, or perhaps all of them, you know, were out of the indie film systems, from their respective countries and their own industries. There was a stark contrast, I would again admit, between my experience and theirs, because and it started out with, let's say, the fact, when we had to introduce up from the moment we had to introduce ourselves, so everybody would get up out of that 71 people's cohort, producers cohort. Everybody would get up, say their name, you know say the names of the films, perhaps, or perhaps the second thing was, their name, their country, and the national funds they have, in their countries. And perhaps, I was the only one, who said that they do not have a single national fund for films, in their country. The There were various sessions which were so enlightening, which were so heartwarming, because I got to realize that some of the challenges are across the board. They do not matter whether you're from Pakistan or from India or from another part of the world, whether you're from, Europe, or from South Asia, or from North America, or whichever, part of the world you had come from. Some of the challenges all the indie producers would face across the board, but then there were some of the practices, for example, let's say, being aware of, let's say, this green campaign, so those were the kind of sessions I admitted that, and I said that, I have never felt more third world because we don't have waste disposal systems, in the places where we shot, my second film, Kamli. And here we are talking about how to recycle, how to, count the carbon footprint, and, alternative types of vehicles, and then producing water from air and having that kind of machine. I just thought, then perhaps in another century it will take us to get to those standards, or perhaps, those levels of practices. But I would say that, it was I wouldn't say a massive learning experience, because I made but I did make, great friends there. uh and Rakasri, of course, is one of them,
Mm-hmm.
one of my dearest friends that I have ended up making. And then, we're part of those groups. Perhaps I found myself a part of community, because the other thing, since we do not have an industry or an infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
here, and I said right in the beginning of our conversation that we still operate out of our silos, at least when we are making our films. I thought, I felt like I actually tangibly found myself a community.
Mm-hmm.
We are part of WhatsApp groups,
Yeah.
where we keep discussing our projects. We keep, sending collaboration offers to each other, the opportunities that each of us can avail,
Yeah.
and are being offered in any part of the world. So whatever not,
Mm-hmm.
so the kind of networking a producer has to have, which they are, let's say, responsible for doing on their own. Perhaps, that lab allowed me to do it in one go with at least 71 people, and what a massive number that
Yeah,
is.
definitely.
So from feeling like I am by myself
Mm-hmm.
to myself a community of 71 practicing filmmakers, almost my age, of course, and almost my amount of experience that they have had by then. But also, those mentors, those practicing, industry gurus, from
Mm-hmm.
the European media and film industry that we got to interact with, and they shared their practices with us, the insights that they shared with us, the tips and tricks that they, shared us, which massively informed in how I wanted to go about, you know, designing the business plan for Lali, and that I exactly, tried replicating for it. And so there was, let's say, not just, let's say, things for my heart and mind. They were actually there for which I could actually, hands-on operate from.
That's beautiful, Kanwal. I mean, every time you're answering a question of mine, I'm sensing a lot of resilience into it. I know, like, it's hard, it's difficult, it's depressing at moment, I'm sure. Like, I can only imagine it from here, maybe. But I can see so much resilience. And even though I'm not a filmmaker at all, I don't work in films, but still, it's so very inspiring to learn from this because, after all, I'm a South Asian too. I'm very close to the reality of censorship and how your voice have been gagged and things like that. So it is so very inspiring to hear that, Kanwal. Thank you so much for sharing. I now want to know a bit more about Lali. I haven't yet seen it, of course, because it's not out there. But I mean, it's the first all Pakistani production to premiere at the Berlinale. So how did that feel? I mean, when I'm like just saying that line, I myself is I am thrilled. So how does it feel for you? Because you have put so much love and care into it. How was that?
Like I said, that I was very deliberate about not repeating the mistakes that I
Mhm.
did with my previous projects, and I was committed to making new mistakes, which I did quite a fair share of. uh, we started sending out, so it was, let's say, halfway through December that we, when we wrapped up our production
Uh-huh.
process. And that March onwards, in fact mid-March onwards, the festivals start taking entries and whatever submissions and whatever not. So we were quite raw in our drafts of editing when we started sending out our film, and it took us from March to November end, almost a whole year, which we should have, let's say, by default taken
Mhm.
to complete the post-production process
Mhm.
of it.
Mhm.
But we thought that, since with one of our previous films, it kind of worked that, you had sent a draft and they had liked it and they had taken it up. So perhaps, this is how it is done, So we did land with our wrong foot forward, with the festival run with Lali, in the beginning.
Uh-huh.
So eventually, by the end of November, when we did get into Berlinale, and I will tell you a bit of, other detail
Yeah,
before,
yeah, of
what
course.
happened to us before that. So again, it didn't just, let's say, come as this big reward to us, but it came with a lot of healing, because, again, we had paved ourselves a lot of grievances and grief, through March to November, that the film is not checking the right boxes at the international circuits, festival circuits. They are again, expecting, and we were fostering a lot of, let's say, heartache, that they expect the South Asian films, this and that, to be in a such a way, and then checks those many boxes. And since this film is not that kind of narrative, of course, they're not liking it, if it is going to make it to the international film festivals at all or not. So we had all those kinds of fears, and we were in a lot of misery, I would say. I was particularly.
Uh-huh.
You know and during that time, of course, the post production process was not any easier. There is not a single, I'm saying this as a statement, I'm sure, you know it might have some nuances, but not a single reliable 5.1 mix studio here. you know so we had to scrap our entire sound design, and do it anew with a group of at least, three artists,
Mm.
three artists who had never collaborated before. So on the artistic front also, it was again, came with its own fair share of challenges.
Mhm.
But our film did get selected at Busan again.
Yes.
And then at Tokyo, and then at IFFR. And we had to pull out from all these three festivals. I'm not sure if I should be taking these names or not, but then we knew that, this time around, we needed at least, uh, out of those big five, we needed that
Uh-huh.
one such festival, to do the world premiere of Lali with.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
thank God for Berlinale that it happened.
Mhm.
And in fact, I had to choose between IFFR and Berlinale, and I wrote to them and I said that, please let me know of your decision, because there's another festival that I want to go
Yeah.
to. And of course, I didn't say this in these many words,
Mhm.
but of course, I had to very trickily phrase my
Get the notion.
request that, I needed to know their answer. And Busan, we took a leap of faith. We said that, okay, we've tasted Busan.
Yeah.
So certainly we're not going back there.
Mhm.
We would like to try our luck with another festival this time around. So of course, it was a very tough choice that we had to make.
Right.
Salman knew those programmers personally
Mhm.
as well. And
Mhm.
then he
Definitely.
felt a personal obligation, towards actually accepting their acceptance of our submission. So, it came, so it was again a very interestingly challenging
Mhm.
journey with Lali.
Mhm.
But then Berlinale came, and perhaps, it helped us wash out, you know, all the precarious situations we had landed ourselves into, and the lot of grievances that came with, let's say, the
Mhm.
rejection from any other
Mhm.
festivals.
Mhm.
And it was, let's say, a group of, let's say, 35 of us artists who accompanied the film to Berlinale, and they were, let's say, just blown out of their wits that you have brought an entire village. And we said exactly that we are this excited, actually, with our film being seen. And, you know, like again, now it's been 78 years of our independent existence, again,
Yes.
whatever that counts for. I'm just saying that, not a single Pakistani, solely produced Pakistani film has ever been to Berlinale, solely produced. There have been co-productions. And
Yeah,
then the
yeah, I
last
understand.
film, which was again a co-production that made it to the panorama, was back in 1971.
Mm.
Imagine. Now, I talk about 1971 like, it was 20 years ago, but now when you actually sit down to count, almost 50, almost
Yeah.
50.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in fact, more than 50 now,
More than 50, actually. Yeah, it's
half a
about
century.
55 years now.
So, those kind of, let's say, that kind of positionality does entertain and does tickle my, you know, ego. And it does fancy me a lot.
It must be thrilling, it must be magical, and it must be
So, yeah,
so very inspiring, particularly when you have had such difficult time and such difficult, precarious journey before that.
yeah.
But Kanwal, I was also wondering because, like Cannes, Berlinale, Busan, all of these are like very big names. Of course, they do something to your film. They open a certain section of world audience for you. But I'm also trying to understand, being a transnational film producer from Pakistan, do you think going to these festivals, earning certain awards, do they open more doors for you? Do they open more opportunities? Do they make your journey a little bit more smooth?
It's always a contrast, so far in my personal experience, that whatever happens to us on the international front stays there. Like it's a secret. Whatever happens in the international festivals has to stay there. And then, we will have our own life,
Yeah.
back home.
Mm,
I would say back home, apart from, let's say, a feather on the cap, which
mhm.
is very, very intangible,
Right.
in terms of, what it would practically do to us.
Mm.
It could actually backfire, like in the case of, uh, Zindagi Tamasha, Joyland,
Yeah,
and
no, I
we
understand.
already know
I
that.
understand. Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm just saying that, there are two parallel realities that we have to deal with. On the international front, I will be honest, at least, personally with me, it has actually helped. Yes, winning those accolades,
Mm-hmm.
getting a film seen by an international audience. It might just tangibly materialize into the immediate next project, or it might not, but it
Yeah.
does land us into, let's say, possibilities that we didn't know of, or perhaps, that we could not have reached, had we known of them before. For example, one festival's acceptance, gives you the validation, and it is enough for other festivals to, take up your film then. So,
Mm-hmm.
one festival, got us into another festival, that festival got us into another festival, that kind of validation does come. And then the furthering of the journey of the film,
Mm-hmm.
does come through that international exposure. And then through the festivals, exploration of the market, finding potential distributions, is also something that, we don't know another way of, going about, you know. So that comes through our old films, and them having an international profile now has helped me,
Mm-hmm.
get a sales agent or a sales company on board for Lali, before we would even, do our world premiere. I made that decision a bit too late, I must admit. But then I did make sure that, we would have that in place, before we would travel. I would travel to Berlin, practically travel to Berlin, before that festival, a bit too late because they could not then plan well enough for the European film market, with our film, and have it on their slate already printed. And then but then they are exploring other ways now, and with other festivals, of course, that's happening. So I knew the ways, at least, that how it is done, because of that lab, and then out of the experience of the previous films,
Right.
and uh, you know, having the exposure and then the knowledge of how the festival circuit operates.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it does, of course, and I am a staunch believer of, let's say, that if you practice something, if you pursue something, the universe does conspire, in favor of yours. So yeah, if you sit idle and expect and wish that the cosmos, the universe will still conspire, no, it won't. So that's the thing. Back home, again, does it smoothen us anything? Perhaps, I have yet to experience that, except for those feathers that we add to the poster of the to the promotion of the film. Beyond that, we do get profiled as, oh, their films are mostly seen, or they perhaps deliberately plan to get their films not seen by the local audience, and perhaps they do it as a publicity stunt and
Mm-hmm.
whatever not,
Yeah.
that also happens to us. It doesn't help us, get our films seen by the censor boards to review, and give them a certificate either ways, of course. um uh, and the fact that, a film that's been to the international circuit, when it comes home, would get, let's say, a better business.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's also something I have not experienced. I haven't seen many other producers also, that they could not experience that. So yeah, there are, like I said, two parallel realities, and they hardly seldom collide, or
Right.
let's say intersect.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Thank you, Kanwal. I am amazed by how candid and honest you are with your answers. I hope like people who are trying to make a career in film production and making films, they will get something from it. Because, of course, for this podcast, I've been talking to number of South Asian film artists based in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, or based in some other country in the global north, and they all share journey of difficulties on multiple levels. Of course, the difficulty means different things to all of them, but they have been sharing so much about this. I hope, like, when somebody new comes in, they probably will get some insights from all these chats we have had, and they will probably know to better strategize it in some ways. As you have just mentioned, they probably will make new mistakes, but they will probably not repeat your old mistakes. They'll probably take that away from it, this conversation. I'm almost at the end of my conversation now, Kanwal. So I'd love to know, like, what are you working on now and what do you want to do next?
Uh, like, I am a multidisciplinarian
Mhm.
as an artist. So there are lots of projects that are in the pipeline and that we are developing, of course, on multiple fronts. Like on my theater front, there's a theater production that's going to take place in August, and I'm prepping for that.
Mhm.
I'm also a theater trainer. So there is a summer camp that we do annually with children, you know,
Wow.
in the summer break. So that's approaching, and I'm prepping
Okay.
for that too. And then, we are, designing the program for it.
Mhm, mhm,
Uh, then there are I curate film festivals, so the two festivals that are going to take place in the latter part of the year,
mhm,
so I'm right now in the process of watching films and then curating a program for that. Uh, and then there are, this whole lot of other projects
mhm,
that are being, let's say, designed and are being developed under, my organization, with my organization Olomopolo. However, on the film front, we are furthering, let's say, Lali's Expo Year of the World.
mhm.
Lali
Excited
is
for
going to
that.
travel to Lali is mashallah traveling to four festivals
Mm.
within April and May. So it is going to IFLA
Yeah.
in the LA,
Mhm.
and it is going to Red Lotus in
Mm.
Vienna, Austria.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's going to Bafisi in Buenos Aires,
Congratulations.
and
Uh-huh.
then it is also going to Istanbul International Film Festival. So
Wow.
yeah, that's what
That's
Lali
a big trip
is
we
on
planned
to
for it.
right now.
Congratulations
And
for
then we
that.
have some other big news, in the
Mhm.
coming months, which I can't disclose right now. But
Yeah.
Lali, mashallah, is going to experience a full bloom over journey, on the festivals front. And but on the more, let's say, serious business side,
Mhm.
we are planning the domestic release of it, and along with that, whatever international regions that we can,
Mhm. Mhm.
plan simultaneous to that.
Mhm.
So the planning, the coordination, the networking around that is happening, and we will get to see, we as in,
Mhm.
our
Mhm.
local audience and our international audience will get to see Lali.
Yeah.
And this is not going to be a standard distribution plan that we are hatching up,
Mhm.
for Lali this time around. There is even going to be, let's say, an innovative idea that we're going to put in place how we will, let's say, distribute it here. So
Mhm.
again, not treading the same paths at all, fully committed to making new mistakes and learning on the way, so that our next film would learn, you know, from this
Yeah.
experience. And with this one, we are making sure that we have a full on ride.
Uh-huh. Big congratulations on Lali and a whole lot of best wishes, Kanwal. And I hope like it gets to be released in UK as well because I am based here and I'd love to see that film. I hope that happens
Yes.
soon. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Before we say goodbye,
hopefully.
Kanwal, is there anything you want to say to our listeners, particularly those who are South Asian film artists, wherever they are based at, trying to find their own path in cinema? Do you want to say anything particular to them before you say goodbye?
So generally, whenever I'm asked this question, I say that no, I don't have any advice to give to anyone. Of course, everybody has their own journeys. They know their practices, their selves, much better than anyone else,
Yeah.
does. Or can
Mhm.
do, apart from themselves. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but artistic pursuit is something that, we should never take for granted.
Yeah.
In South Asia, so India is, let's say, special in many ways when it comes to films, but I know that, the theater artists, even there, have their own fair share of struggles.
Of course.
So, I would say that as multi-sectoral, perhaps, or a multidisciplinary artist,
Mhm.
uh, why did we choose art in the first place? We have to question ourselves that, and we might not find any alternatives to that. We know
Mhm.
why we do it, you know, and we know that why do we not want to do anything else but this?
Of course.
So yeah, uh, it is full of excitement, and what is an excitement without its challenge? So while we are at it, we must enjoy what we are doing, and we know that the glory and everything and the gratification that comes out of it is also something that we cannot ever get from anywhere else.
Mhm.
Financial challenges will always be there, but had that been our concern, we wouldn't have ended up in arts at all in the first place. So let's not bother ourselves with
Oh.
that. But when you age, you do feel like that, you need some financial sustenance.
Mhm.
But mm, if it is meant for you, it will come our way. If
Yeah.
it is not, then, we will be the wild artists that we are.
Mhm.
And it has nothing to do with, I'm just saying that, whatever that I've said so far is
Yeah.
what I have been practicing. And, this is where I am. This is who I am. And I know that, there are a lot of people out there who can relate with this.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for being so honest and so candid, Kanwal. It has been such a treat to talk to you. And here's to making new mistakes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Tabassum. You've
you.
been the sweetest and the warmest, let's say, host.
Thank you
So
so much.
thank you for having me.